Hi there. Welcome to Business Leadership Podcast. In this podcast, I interview successful business leaders and industry experts to share their knowledge and experience to help you grow your business. I truly believe that sometimes a single insight can completely change your business directions and allow you to achieve your business goals. In this episode, I interview Kim Orlesky. She's an author of Sell More Faster. She's a CEO at the KO Advantage Group, and she's also international speaker. As you know, building a business process is always a difficult part, whether it's a process around your marketing department, your sales department, purchasing department, or even IT department. It requires a lot of hard work. It requires a lot of time, resources, and also discipline and structure to have that process proven over the time as well. Kim and her team at KO Advantage Group, they help business leaders to implement the world-class proven sales process they developed over the years. During my discussion with Kim, she shared insight on what changed during this COVID, when it comes to communication and sales. I think you will enjoy my discussion, especially around when she shared strategies for revenue growth and also virtual sales process. And before we go, don't forget to like and subscribe to this channel. Stay tuned for new episodes every week. Until next time, have a good one. Enjoy. Hey guys, welcome to Business Leadership Blog. And today my guest is Kim Orlesky. Kim is a guru in sales and generating revenue. And I'm looking forward to our discussion, Kim. I'm looking forward to learning from you. And you've been, very active on LinkedIn. I watch your content and very inspiring. Thank you so much for your time and welcome to podcast today.
Oh, thank you so much, Gurmeet. I am absolutely honored to be here for today.
Okay, you're welcome. So tell us a little bit, Kim, how do you help a business leaders? A lot of businesses, right, as you know, sales gone to virtual right now, a lot of virtual meetings happening. And what do you see, challenges and where you see the opportunity lies in a sales these days?
You know what? It's one of those interesting things where, when 2020, a lot of companies went to the virtual methodology only because we were forced to. And what we're seeing is companies have either completely embraced that, or they're in this pattern of, well, this is fantastic. We can't wait until things go back. And where the opportunity is that number one, I don't think anything's ever going to go 100% back.
Mm-hmm.
We spent the last almost 24 months reverting down a process, right? Change has happened. It's very unlikely that we're going to go back to entirely in-person meetings. And so where I want to see more companies get to is understanding where virtual fits in. If it's a 100%, if it is a hybrid, I very doubt that it's going to be the 100% back to that traditional or that in-person interaction. But how does it fit in? How are we able to create effective, lead qualified meetings, conversations? And then as we go forward, it will be a process where a lot more companies take a look at what's taking up too much of our time, and how do we automate that? How do we use artificial intelligence, bots, some type of automation to help streamline that and get through that bottleneck as quickly as possible.
Mm-hmm. Can you get everything you want to get it done in a sales meeting in a virtually, Kim, or how about the body language, emotion side of it? Can you get all those things captured in a sales meeting, or is something else was left out of the sales process?
Well, I think you can, right? I mean, when it comes to body language, what salespeople need to get really much better at is understanding how to read those micro emotions, right? How does inflection in the voice happen? How does people move in their eyes? Now, we have to change parts of our body language, right? Maybe that means sitting a little bit further away from the desks, holding our hands a little bit higher so that people can see that interaction that we're creating. The other thing that we have to take a look at is how we were building rapport before. Typically, for a lot of companies, they saw themselves as rapport being built as part of the sales meeting, right? We would spend the first 10 minutes of an hour-long meeting talking about small talk and current events and the weather. It was great. With virtual meetings and virtual selling, oftentimes we're limited to about 20 minutes, 30 minutes max, especially for a first interaction. And to spend that same amount of 10 minutes in that rapport building phase no longer makes sense. We're not going to spend 50% of our meeting or a 33% of a meeting just talking about small talk. And so what I think most people have to get their minds around is that rapport is built before the sales meeting, and we end up going right into the interactions that ultimately lead to higher value conversations. Rapport is built in social media, social selling, status updates, so that when people do connect with us, they feel like they already know a little bit of our personality. They've already agreed that there's a certain level of commonality, so that we can move ourselves further into the sales process and sales cycle in the limited time that we have with that client.
Does that change, traditional sales process quite a bit, Kim? If somebody's been, have built a sales process, hey, first meeting we're going to do, some fact finding, and a second meeting we're going to do, third meeting we're going to do. Does that change virtually, the sales process that people had before that?
No, so it doesn't. It's the same. It's just in virtual selling, we need to be far more intentional with the information that we need to get from a client. In that traditional sales process, oftentimes your best salespeople had this, je ne sais quoi, right? We didn't know what it was. They were just, Jim was just really friendly. He was friends with everybody. Now that we're able to have way more data science, we're able to have way more information on how the call is going, how many questions were being asked, which questions actually received the right responses. This allows us to now go ahead and say, this is the information that we ultimately need. So the sales process might be the same, but instead of going ahead and feeling like we're arbitrarily asking questions, we now know which questions are going to get us in depth a lot quicker. This actually also means that we typically have to invite emotional intelligence far earlier into the sales cycle as well. In traditional sales, where I kind of came from, we never talked about the role emotional intelligence took inside the sales cycle. In the virtual environment, in order to create that commonality and that trust factor, we have to invite it far earlier on so that we're able to still follow the steps: lead qualification, value discovery, eventually to proposal.
How about the information available in your fingertips? When you in a virtual environment, you have way too much information you have access to, right? When you meet a person to person, the focus is more on our conversations. You may not be able to pull all that information, but virtually, it's very easy to pull information. Here, let me show you this file. Let me show you this file. Sometimes that focus on a person goes a little bit, more focus on information than simply in a personal connection.
Oh, I'm so glad you brought this up. So this is one of my biggest pet peeves, because I say, just because you can screen share doesn't mean you have to, right? Like, just like, this is like, Jurassic Park said, we talked about, we were able to create dinosaurs, but we never asked ourselves if we should, right? Just because we could create, because we can share information, because I can pull up a slide deck, because I can pull up a demo, doesn't mean I should. And when we really take a look at what was effective in the in-person environment, it never was the fact that we could actually pull up a slide deck in the very first meeting. That never worked in person. It shouldn't work in virtual, right? And the vice versa approach. So your first meeting, like I want to, if you're working with any colleagues, if you are a sales leader, I want you to immediately slap the hand of anybody that goes ahead and pulls up a deck in the very first meeting. Unless you are selling a purely transactional deal and you are expecting to close right then and there should be zero reason to be pulling up that information. Let me find out from you. Let me ask you the questions on what you would find most valuable, so that when the time comes, usually in maybe the second meeting, the third meeting, now we can pinpoint, you said you'd find this valuable. Here's that feature within that product. Here's how that client has used the exact use case that you're saying that you want to impact your business, as opposed to, here's a dump of information, right? Tell me what you think is valuable. What questions do you have? And almost never people have questions, because they're like, I'm good, right? You've gotten all over them. We talked about this in traditional sales, right? Don't go ahead and puke all over your client and talk all about your product and service. You're doing that in the first meeting by immediately going into a screen share, immediately going into a deck, immediately going into a demo without asking client any questions about themselves.
Wow, very interesting. Yeah, definitely. We all do that. I'm guilty of doing a couple of times that to myself, just pull the slides out and start talking. But definitely, I think you made a very valid point. Definitely you want to avoid that because you need to understand. Does it really make sense for the client? What is it for client? Before you even get to that point, right?
I think, and I think all of us at some point have made that error. What you need to look at, and I'm sure there's going to be a couple people that are going to listen to this and be like, I completely disagree with her. Like I always do it and it always works. It's okay, great. Like try doing your own A/B testing. Right? Take
Mm-hmm.
the next 10 calls and do exactly what you did, right? Pull up the deck, pull up the demo, right? I mean, if you're one of those people, and then do another 10 calls where you don't. And then by the end of those two sessions of 10 calls or 5 calls or whatever you want to do as your own personal sample size, see what ended up moving forward in sales cycle more frequently. I can almost guarantee you, right, that the ones where you never opened the information were far more valuable, were actually secured a second meeting more so than the ones where you did the demo or the deck pitch, because the
Mm-hmm.
moment they do that, the people that do say yes to this have now taken all this information and they're determining, well, this is how I think it's going to work for me, right? They're self-diagnosing themselves and they're
Mm-hmm.
trying to find their own solution. And what ends up happening is even if they do move further in the sales cycle, they may not even be a right fit. So
Yeah.
find out, be the doctor that each one of these clients deserves. Find out about their symptoms, find out about what's ailing them first, and then provide a solution, as opposed to saying, here's all the prescriptions that I could possibly give you, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now, tell me, out of all of this stuff, right, which of these things do you think you're suffering from? Or which one would you like to learn more about? That would be the
Mm-hmm.
worst doctor in the world. And we would like, no, like, I think they would end up having their license removed. We should
Yeah.
license salespeople just so that if they do that, we can immediately remove their licenses.
That'd be fun. Interesting. Uh, let's talk about there's two parties in it. Definitely salespeople, they got to do better, but also business leaders who try to make a decision from the sales process. How hard is for them to virtually make a decision on something? Yeah, we can provide information. Sometimes the information may not be to their part the way they want it. They used to make a decision differently than now they're making decisions. So how difficult is it virtually business leaders to make a decisions on a sales process?
I don't think it's much different. I just think we need to understand where our clients and our buyers are coming from in today's environment. We've been saying it for years, even before virtual selling became like this very on trend thing, is that our buyers are more educated than ever before. And
Mm-hmm.
now this is even more so, because they're finding out all their information that they need through LinkedIn, through their own research, through their own conversations, and they're going through and they know exactly what they want to do. So I think we, as salespeople, we need to really embrace the mental shift that our role is not to sell to clients. Our role is not to force them to buy. It is to assist them in their own buying process,
Mm-hmm.
assist them in the decisions that they've already made to help them improve their business. And so for a lot of salespeople, this is what they have to really start to manage themselves, is that people don't buy because they need that piece of software, right?
Mm-hmm.
They're not comparing all roads like all the exact same things. Let's say I am looking for a chat bot for my website, right? I've
Yeah.
decided that chatbots are a thing. I want to invest in a chatbot. And I go ahead and I contact all these different companies for chatbots. That's actually less likely of a situation than we claim to believe. What actually is happening is a company is going ahead and they're saying, you know what? I think we could probably convert our website viewers even faster. And
Yeah.
then a chatbot company comes in, and then you have a microsite company that comes in, and you have a marketing company that comes in, and you have somebody else who's hosting social media. Because the issue here is that we're not converting. And so when we take a look at this, we have to ask ourselves, what does the buyer ultimately want? What is their goal? This is actually one of my favorite questions. This is the very first question I typically ask in every single meeting is,
Yeah.
like, what goal do you have for yourself in the next 6 months or a year? Let's start really far in the future, and then let's bring ourselves down to the place where, well, here is the right solution for you, as opposed to what solution are you looking for, right?
Mm-hmm.
That is a very narrow focus of an idea. And what that ends up doing is it actually creates a harder struggle throughout the sales process. And this is why
Okay.
salespeople feel like their sales cycles are taking so much longer. Is because there's so much focus on the product and why somebody should invest in that product, as opposed to the business solution or the business goals, and then helping them to see how your solution is ultimately going to achieve their business goals now and in the next 3, 5, 10 years. We need to really take a look that our buyers are here to be with us for the long haul and not for the immediate decision.
So what you're saying, you want to see in the future, in a 6 months or 12 months down the road, and let them to visualize their solution, what they can visualize, what kind of success they can, and we've been a part of that success. I guess whatever solution is gonna get them to the success, what the buyer desires.
Absolutely. And so, and this, like, the moment we get our, like, I love to say this, like, I mean, we need, our job as salespeople is to help our clients get to dream phase. Right? What
Mm-hmm.
do they dream of? And then help show them that we are the guide to help them to get there. This invites emotional intelligence into the conversation. This invites true empathy and discovery, because now I come to a place, like, you've heard this for years, be genuinely curious about your clients, right? Stand in their shoes, get to know them. Let's start off by understanding, where do they want to be in 6 months, 12 months, maybe even further than that, if that's where your solution typically impacts. And then let's talk about all of the impacts that that's going to create once the client is there. And then we can bring ourselves back and start to talk about how our solution will help them to achieve that goal. Your client will see you now as a partner and not as a transactional provider.
I see. So, especially with the COVID, Kim, from business leadership standpoint, either president of the company or CEO who's trying to, see 6 months down the road, you think their strategies changed quite a bit, with how they were approaching before COVID and during the COVID and after the COVID. Does that make that lines a little blurry where they want to be, because there's so much uncertainty in an environment right now?
You know what? I think that their priorities may have changed. I know a lot of the companies I talked to, when I was talking to them in 2019, and they would say, here's where we want to be in 6 months, 12 months from now. Here's the things that we're going to be focusing on. That was great. And then once kind of COVID hit, it really shuffled priorities. But I feel that, because it's been over the last 24 months almost, I think companies are now looking at this as, here's where the new way of business is going to be, right? It's like going, playing a sport and deciding, this is the strategy that I'm going to take, right? And we watch, let's say we're playing baseball, and we watch the pitcher, and the pitcher keeps pitching right, and we're like, awesome, right? I know where exactly I'm going to hit the ball, right? I've been watching how all these plays are going. I'm watching how the people in the field are running around. That's where I'm going to do. And then right when you go to step up to bat, they change the pitcher. And you have no idea how this person pitches. You watch these people reshuffle, and you're like, I don't know where I'm supposed to stand. I don't know where I'm going to be aiming to hit this ball now. That changed. But after that person has pitched a few times, the person now's third and fourth, and this period of time that has gone on, they have more insight into what they're going to do as their approach. Companies do have a certain level of insight on how they want to approach the next few months. They might not have all the answers, but there is one always certainty always in life, is that we will never have all the answers all the time. We can only take the information that we have and make the best decisions for where we believe we can get to in the future. Companies have already decided it is your job to just agree or disagree that you're going to be able to help them achieve those goals, or that you're not in alignment, right? And that is that should be your very first conversation in every single sales cycle. And if it's not, this is why we have lead qualification, right? Lead qualification is not there to say, I've given the client all this information, they said they're fine with it, we're going to move forward. It should be the other way around. I asked the client a whole bunch of questions. They said, this is where they want, this is their goals, this is how they're approaching it, these are the steps they've already taken to get there. I think we might be able to help them. Or I don't think that what they want is something that we can deliver. So I would much rather bow out and save my time and resources for someone who will be able to, we will be able to impact.
So where does the education piece comes in, Kim? That the company might be going, leadership might be going to one direction, but they may not be going, exactly the way you would approach it. You may want to educate because they probably don't have the right information. You're trying to educate. So what is that? How do you assess that? Hey, listen, do I want to educate this client, to make a right decision, or just go with them, whatever the decision they already made, and then the direction they're going with?
The path of least resistance is that to agree with what your client wants. Like, we have to believe that if someone has worked in a company for 3, 5, 10 years, if that company has been around for 5, 10, 20 years, they probably know a lot about their company and their industry and the clients they want to serve, more so than the salesperson who has just started calling on this account 6 weeks ago. And so, if we go ahead and we try to convince somebody to go down our direction, we're going to be faced with a lot of resistance. Now, there's people that thrive off of that. Okay. And if that's the way you want to go, awesome. Go and do that. I like to go from the place of the path of least resistance. Let's find the people who are aligned with where we want to go to, and let's agree that how this partnership will ultimately look at. And then we're able to actually move ourselves forward in that way. Do you try to if you're a boat, do you go with the tide, or do you say, well, this is fun, but let's try to go the complete opposite way, right? And if you're rowing, right, you're going to exhaust yourself before you even see traction. Whereas if you find everyone who's going down this path, you're like, okay, well, let's meet them there. Let's all go together with this. Every sales cycle that we face, you are going to see, some clients that are going to be ready to say yes. Some clients are going to be ready to say yes 3 months from now. Some that are going to be ready to say yes a year and a half from now and beyond. But what they will do is they'll continue to follow you. They'll continue to be with you through information, the social content that you're sharing, the opinions you have, right? The shares of the testimonials that you have, because they're like, cool, that's a direction that we're already going on. Whereas if you try to approach a client and say, listen, let me change your mind completely in the first opportunity that we've met. Yeah, you might as well ask them who their political party is and then tell them why they should vote differently. Okay.
Interesting. So another part. So let's talk about something that's very challenging for everybody, and I think that's we all struggle with that. Selling ourselves is one thing, but now building a team of salespeople, training them, educating them. How do you bring the mindset? So where you see the challenges in that, and especially with the pandemic, you definitely have to train people. You have to make sure the mindset stays the way it should stay, and keep them, train over the time, and stay focused on where you see challenges on those, Kim. And if you talk a little bit, how do you help our sales teams, to stay on top of the sales game?
Yeah. So I mean, when it comes to getting your salespeople to embrace this idea, I mean, the first thing I like to say is, I mean, you as depending on how your demographics of your sales teams work, I mean, your salespeople might say, well, I've been doing this for years. This is always the way it works. I'm not going to change that. But there is a big change that has happened, whether they want to admit it or not. And it's our buyers. Our buyers are getting younger and younger, and they're being brought in at younger ages. And I mean, typically, and depending on how complex your sales are, your influencers might be like, let's be honest here. I was dealing with one influencer. I graduated high school and this kid wasn't even born yet, right? And I couldn't call them I call them a kid, but honestly, they're an adult now, right?
Yeah.
And they're the influencer of this decision. Now, they don't have a lot, but when I say influencer in this case, they were the ones who were doing all the research, right? Somebody said, listen, we want to go down this path. Can you do a ton of research? When you think of somebody who's 21, 23, 27 years old, right? They grew up in a completely different technological time. So we need to meet our clients where they are. So part of this training, part of this conversation means, what are the mediums, right? The modes that we're having this conversation in? Are we embracing video? Are we embracing social? Are we having conversations with people even before the sales cycle starts? Knowing that if it's not our buyer directly who's having that conversation, they're probably having someone on their behalf starting to do all of these rounds. So when we meet with sales teams, we definitely focus a lot on the virtual selling process, right? How do we have 20-minute meetings that are specific and measurable and are actually moving faster, right? It might mean that we're having 3 or 4 meetings, but if each one's 20 minutes, you've been an hour inside active sales cycle.
Yeah.
That's a pretty good return on investment. And it will typically translate if you are doing in person. It's very hard for an in-person sales process to translate entirely virtual. The other thing that we do with sales teams is now we say technology is now a bigger tool for sales individuals than we need to. How do we integrate that? How do we use LinkedIn, video, direct messaging, text messaging, email sequences to automate, to move through these sales cycles? Because the one thing that the salesperson is really good at and should really be focusing on is meetings. Not necessarily on the lead gen side. And almost every single salesperson will tell you they hate the lead gen side. They hate the cold calling. They hate the emailing. They hate doing all of that, but it was a means to the end. And technology now exists to allow that to be completely automated. So we show teams, how do we take over that 60% of the activities that were only generating 10% of the results? How do we automate that? How do we make it as part of our natural conversation so that your salespeople are now focused on, instead of spending like 4 hours, 5 hours of their day lead generating with maybe 2 hours of their day having meetings, how do they get to a place where they're now having 11, 12 meetings of 20 minutes, right? And they're actually moving sales cycles forward that much quicker. And that's really what it is. It's about moving to speed, getting them to the high value activities that they deserve and they actually love to be in, and starting to automate and moving through very quickly the processes that they really dislike and that aren't providing the company nearly as much value.
Very interesting. And that's where I think the challenge comes in with a lot of, salespeople. They have to embrace the video call. I see a lot of business leaders I've been talking to during the COVID is the people just simply not comfortable with the video. But I think that's something, it's just part of that environment, that change, the expectation change from customers, I guess, right? They expect you to be on a video.
It's, you know what, it's a new technology that we have to get used to, right? I mean, when email first came out, people were like, they were uncomfortable with it. They're like, I don't really understand what the use of it is. And then all of a sudden it took off and it went, completely, on the other side, where all of a sudden everything was an email. And it was like, oh, okay, we got to find the balance a little bit. We're still in the very early stages of video. And once we hit that tipping point, right? All of a sudden you're going to see like every salesperson is probably going to get to a place where like every message is going to be video, and then people are going to be like, "Whoa, let's slow back a little bit, video, right? Yeah, let's find out what video is." And I like to say that when I use the word video, I like to also consider the idea of GIF, right? How do you create interactive messages? How do you, like, with a wave, like, just show somebody like, "Hey, I'm a friendly person." We loved doing that in traditional sales. That's why the pop-in was so effective, because we would show up to somebody and we're like, I don't have a meeting, like, you're not expecting me, but I just wanted to put a face to the name. If Tony can come out and say hi, I would really appreciate that. I will send him a call or an email afterwards. And Tony would come out and he'd like, listen, hi, I'm really busy. And you're like, cool, I just wanted to introduce myself. So now you know what I look like when I come in.
I see.
That is what now video and GIF should look like inside somebody's direct message. It should feel very much like a pop-in, as opposed to a demo, as opposed to an ad, as opposed to a video version of a voicemail. And we need to find where each one of those things fit in. We do need to embrace it, because this is how people have embraced technology. This is number one why Instagram took off. Now it's TikTok is taking off. We see the algorithms for all these social media see that video is more interactive than any other form of content. Our salespeople need to get trained on this. They need to start using it. They need to start embracing it and sharing best practices internally on how they've used it.
How about video in an email that came? If you want to explain somebody a concept, or instead of typing a few sentences, or somebody has to read that email, why not just have a quick short video and make those couple of points a little bit more personal in the email as well, or stay away from it?
It depends on where you are in the sales cycle. I mean, if this is right after a first meeting and you're again going in and pitching it with an email and like with a video within the email, it may be premature for that conversation. If it was one point you wanted to make, or hey, I had a thought on this, right? You may include this, but be very, very cautious about how you use video. One of the things I like, so one of the partners that we have is Vidyard. And what I love about Vidyard is they will automatically transcribe or put closed caption on their video. Majority of video is being watched on silent. And so if you are going to do that, make sure that you're keeping your video very short, like less than a minute. And ideally even 15 seconds, 30 seconds long. Your best actually open rates are 7 seconds, but most people just aren't there yet. And so you want to create that very interactive, but save that. If you're asking for somebody to pay attention, wait till you're in a place where you can pay attention to them. Don't turn this into a one-sided conversation. Listen, I want you to see what I have to do. I'm going to send you all this stuff, like pay attention to this. If it is a follow-up or as we had this conversation, I just wanted to reiterate, or I want to show you these big points that you said was valuable. Here it is. That's one thing. If it's to get the pre-engagement or the excitement before that, save that for the meeting. Try to push them towards the meeting again. Have that conversation so that now they're expecting it, and that and it's something that they're going to use as a reference as opposed to insight. But if you do use an insight type of email, like I'd like to generate interest, keep it that way. What is the curiosity? How do you pose questions? How do you ask them how they're currently doing that so that they are more likely to engage, as opposed to here's a whole bunch of information. Again, let me know what you find interesting. There's nothing interesting that they're going to find from it.
I see. So there's no point sending a video with a bunch of screenshots or presentations and follow up as a discussion. Simply just get for the next meeting, I guess, right? That's what you.
As a follow, if it was a discussion in the meeting, it's okay for a video post meeting. If it was not a discussion for the meeting, just save it. And instead, if you want to create it as a discussion, post some questions, post some ideas, maybe show the result that someone received, right? And say, would you like to see how we achieve that person's result? Because the goal of the meeting is to either get a lot of questions out so that you're gaining information, or encourage the client to ask us questions. Right. But if it's just, I sent you that information, did you review it? And the client's like, yeah, what questions do you have? Well, nothing. Do you want to just go through it again? Yeah. That's not valuable for the client. Yeah, and it will be really hard. It's wasting time, but it's also really hard to sell now at a premium for the client, because you've done the whole magic show. You've shown them how everything works. And then you're like, do you want to see it again? And the client's like, I've already seen the magic trick. Like, why would I want to see the magic trick again?
Yeah. Interesting. So tell Kim, walk us through, like, how do you get, what's your journey been before you get to, sales? If you talk about your little bit of background, how you got so good in the sales, and how do you start coaching people?
Oh my goodness. So you know what? I through chance and circumstance, like have you ever watched and it's an old one now, but it was like Slumdog Millionaire. And and he went ahead, he answered all the questions. And every answer he had was he's genuinely through coincidence of his own life. I feel like sometimes that is me. Like every role I've ever taken, every position I've ever been in, through coincidence. I mean, I had a sales work from home basis back in 2010, which was that was almost unheard of. Very few people were purely work from home sales. That was me. I ended up doing completely virtual selling again in 2012, 2014. Where we were actually encouraged to do more video. We were encouraged to start having this before Zoom. It was Skype. That was really kind of the thing. But we would have Skype with people in different continents, and we would be trying to sell really massive $4 million transactions. to some of these companies.
Wow.
And so I took a lot of that, that information, and then through my own life, I mean, when I had my son and he was 4 months old, I started training and teaching on sales process. And companies were like, this is great. Like, number one, like, how did you do this? Like, here you are on the other side of the country. Like, this is fantastic. We want whatever you did in order to get us to buy the sales training. We want you to train our companies, and we want you to do it. And we were like, that's great. We're going to do it online. My son was 4 months old at the time, and I wasn't in a position to do everything, to fly for a day there, a day back, do 3 days of training. And so, I got a lot of inquisitive eyes. I'm like, we're not really sure if this is going to work. But thankfully, a lot of companies ended up embracing this. And now today they're ahead of the trend, right? So when 2020 hit, they had already embraced virtual selling. All we did was we kept asking ourselves questions around, like, how do we make this faster? How do we make this easier? How do we make this better? And through that, we ended up coming down to a sales process that, number one, specifically works for any company that is wanting to embrace virtual selling, whether that is fully or through a hybrid model. And then number two, the next question that we're really asking ourselves is, how do we empower one salesperson to have the power of four? What would that potentially look like? And now we're moving down the path where, through technology, through some of this tech stack, in conjunction with that virtual selling process, we're now at a place where we're seeing companies that are growing, expanding, selling higher value transactions in faster timeframes than ever before. And it's just an honor to work with all of these companies and watch them grow, and in conjunction watch ourselves grow, because we are the pillars of helping them achieve that level of success.
I mean, that is the only way to generate revenue. Increase the revenue. Doesn't matter what goal you have. If you want to meet goals, you need a sales team. And there's no other way to go around it.
You need a salesperson, but you also need, this comes from the ideas of Scrum and Agile, right? How do you really take a look at what you're doing and ask yourself, okay, if what is the 20% of the activities that's generating 80% of the results? And I think not enough sales teams are looking at that and asking that question. We've already asked those questions. We've already developed that. And so now we can easily come in, and oftentimes we're not recreating the wheel for these companies. We're just saying, here's what it is. Throw the rest of this out, or put it at a different place in the sequence. Put it in a different place in the sales cycle. You're bringing it way too early. And so what they're now able to see is like, oh my goodness, not only are we generating more revenue, right? We're seeing some of these secondary outcomes that they're seeing is that they're becoming way more predictable in cash flow. They now have better insight onto when their clients are going to buy and for how much they're going to buy, because they're following this process all the way through. Sales is not arbitrary. Sales should never feel like, let's just throw a whole bunch of ingredients in a bowl and hope it makes a cake. Right? If you want to make a really good cake, you follow the recipe. And we've created that recipe that works every single time. Only later on do you add a little bit of creativity to it. But I can promise you that what we've created will work for 80% of the companies that go ahead and embrace it. And the 20%, they will customize themselves as for their own individual companies.
So it's a structural approach with the discipline. You just get the same, you go through the same process over and over, and you get this expected result, what you're looking for. So it's a step-by-step approach what to get to there.
Who doesn't want that, right?
Yeah, everybody wants that.
Yeah, everybody wants this, right? I mean, every company, there's a reason why companies like McDonald's and Starbucks and, even the Gap have been able to explode across North America, is because they know everything from product placement to how we greet our clients to, when do we recommend? There's a reason why, Microsoft and Salesforce and Slack have grown as well. It's because when you're going to improve and grow with those companies, they know exactly. And we're not talking about scripts. Scripts is a completely different conversation. But what they do know is, here's the information we have to gather from the client in order to move them down the proper path. And then when they give us that information, then we get this additional information. And then we get this additional information. And assuming we have all of these pieces of additional information, we're good. Right now, we're ready to sell. If nothing else, we should be just asking ourselves for gut check reactions. One of the things that for most companies will just transform them is, I say, why are you going to a proposal if you're not really sure if the client is going to say yes? right? Like
Hmm.
that should just never happen. I tell companies right off the get-go, I'm like, never get to proposal until you feel 80% that the clients are going to say yes. And if you don't feel that the client is going to say yes, instead of spending 30 minutes on a proposal that may or may not win, depending on whatever way the coin flip ends up showing up, heads or tails, right?
Hmm.
Spend the extra 30 minutes meeting with the client again. And like find out from them, like, are they ready to move forward? What else do they need to see in order to move forward? And if they aren't, this was a great time to have that conversation. If they are, even better. Now you know the information that you're going to put into proposal is going to get you to the result, right? The
Hmm.
result for most sales companies isn't to get to proposal as quickly as possible. It's to get to the client. It's to get them to customer success. It's to actually get them to be buying the next product. And we need to start looking that much further into the future.
So not only focus on the product, what we're talking about right now, but also what comes after that, the second or third sales in a career. That's what you.
Always, right? I mean, this is a chess game, and we need to not just be thinking about what's the move that we're going to make, but what's the move that we're going to make? What's the other person's move? What move will we make right after that? And if we don't know as salespeople what we would end up doing, right? How do you know that you got that result? I challenge sales teams all the time on this. I'll ask them things like simple stuff. What's the intention of an email? And people were like, I don't know, to get person to read the email. And it's like, well, okay, but fair enough. But like, how do you know that you've achieved that result? Right? Or like, are you happy to know that the person read the email? Right? Or are you actually wanting them to do something? And
Yeah.
they're like, well, I guess I want them to respond. Okay, that is a good thing that we want to do. So now let's rewrite the email in a way that we actually ask the person to respond.
Hmm.
Too many emails have so many sentences, and they will usually end with like let me know if you have any questions. Tell me if you'd like to see more, right? That's not going
Yeah.
to make me respond, right?
Hmm.
What will is a question, right? The nature of questions force a respond. Would you like to see more? Now I'm asking you a yes or no question. I'm asking for you for that response. Would you like to see how which other companies we've worked for in the past? Yeah, sure. I'd like to see that. Great. Now we're getting response. The difference between is like, what is the action we want the person to take? Start with that and then build out the entire process and sequence that's actually going to get you to those changes.
Hmm. It's the same kind of conversation you have it in person, but you're just having an email, but you're taking to the next step, asking question and just walking them through and get back to the meetings again, I guess, right?
Oh, like so it can be, right? Like, I mean, just know where your next step. If the intention of the email is to get the person to respond, once you receive that response, the intention is then for them to then like to actually respond with a meeting request and get them to actually accept that, right? The intention of the first meeting is to understand, am I going to work with this client, and is that person going to stand on my mountaintop and like sing my praises? Right?
Hmm.
Most people say, like, they'll know a meeting was really good. Well, how do you know a meeting was really good? Well, I guess, because we have another meeting booked.
Yeah.
Well, great. How many of you are actually like pulling up your phone right then and there before the meeting ends and say, Gurmeet, when would you like to meet again?
Yeah.
Right? Like, should we book another meeting for 2 weeks from now? Right? So simple. And yet so many people aren't doing that. They will close the meeting off and they'll be like, this is really great. Let's meet again in 2 weeks. And the client's like, yeah, that's great. And we like end up hitting the leave button on the Zoom link. And
Hmm.
then that's it. And the day takes over and we've lost all of that momentum. And
Yeah.
now we're having to try to exchange emails to try to figure when the best time to meet it. If you know the value of a meeting is to have another meeting booked, get the next meeting booked. Right?
Hmm.
If people are not booking that next meeting, what that tells me is that you never even created value.
Yeah.
Right? And so now you can actually go through, watch a video recording, ask yourself, who did the majority of the talking on that call? Oh,
Hmm.
it was the salesperson.
Yeah.
Well, no wonder the client didn't want to meet again. They didn't want to be told what to do or what not to do, right?
Hmm.
There was no information. Really good dates aren't the ones where you sit down with somebody and you get to hear all about like their varsity years and all the people they dated and how they they did all these vacations and then they
Yeah.
leave after 45 minutes and like, listen, Kim, this was fantastic. We should really do this again. I'd be looking at that person. I'd be like, but why? Like, you don't
Yeah.
know anything about me. Like why would we do this again? Like, I have no interest in doing that again.
Mhm.
And so we want to make sure that we fastest way of finding out if you created value is either booking the meeting or just simply ask the client, was this valuable for you?
Yeah.
Right. And if the client says no, like take, like, hold that tail between your legs and ask yourself, what am I going to do to make it better next time?
Fair exchange. You spend time, talking to them, and they, commit to the next time, right? So it's a fair exchange. That there's some sort of
Absolutely.
commitment. Yeah.
Absolutely. Somebody who does not see value in a meeting is not going to agree to another meeting.
Yeah.
Right.
Mhm.
And so it's not just about getting them to agree, that get it booked in the calendar. You do like one simple thing, right? So, I mean, if you're going to get nothing out of today's podcast, number one, make sure you're actually asking some questions inside your email. If you want to get a response, ask questions. And number two, if you want to continue to build momentum in your meetings, make sure you are booking the next meeting while you are in that meeting. Get it in the calendar, get it booked. Number three, do not propose until you feel 80% certain that the client is going to say yes. You do those three things, you're going to see a crazy amount of new sales cycles, new closes, higher value activities than ever before.
Great point. Kim. Those are very, very good points. If you can focus on those three, I mean, that's half of the battle. You already mentioned a few that mistakes, people make, when somebody building a teams, somebody listening to our podcast, somebody trying to excel their teams, or they're trying to grow their sales team. Where you see them, generally people make mistakes, when they're trying to grow the team or trying to hit their new goals, where you see the biggest mistakes comes in this area. Is it training people? Is it one of the mistake, or not providing right sales process is one of the mistake? Like, where do you see the biggest mistakes in this area?
Honestly, it's process. Right.
Okay.
The fact, like, if somebody does not have their process like articulated and written out, you are leaving it up to each individual. Right.
To figure out whatever they want to do.
That is me opening a restaurant and saying, listen, today we're all going to start to bake blueberry pies. Right now, everyone go and bake blueberry pies, because as long as we're selling blueberry pies, we're good. And everyone's going to have a completely different recipe. And some people are going to be really fast with it. Some people are going to be slow with it. Someone are going to use premium ingredients. Someone's just going to be using cheap ingredients. And there's no consistency across the entire program, right? Which also means that there's no way that we can actually share best practices amongst our team, because somebody's going to be like, well, this is what I did on LinkedIn. And the other person's like, I don't use LinkedIn. And then they're not going to listen.
Yeah.
We want to make sure that your sales process needs to be so articulated. It needs to be written out. Like, here's the questions that we ask. Here's what it means to be in this sales cycle. For me personally, one of my most frustrating points was when I was first in sales cycle, and there was like 3 sales cycle stages. One was called value creation. The other one was called value discovery. And the other one was called client viability or something else like this.
Okay.
I didn't know what the differences were between those, right? They all sounded the same to me. And so I was like, so you would just arbitrarily pick a sales cycle. It was really difficult. We go down to as simple as possible. We call ours like, value creation. And the way we've aligned it is like, well, this is where your buyer is. Right? Your buyer is still considering you and other solutions, right? You're still in the running, but they've probably started to eliminate some of the solutions, right? And as long as you know that you're in your sales cycle. If a company goes ahead and gets really clear on this process, now you can do this yourself, but I can promise you it is going to take a long time to get there, right? Because you have to go in with like a microscope on every single sales cycle and be able to do this. I've seen well-established companies that will take years to develop this, right?
Wow.
Or you take something that has already been established and say, okay, this is what we're going to start to go with now, right? And we will make our little tweaks as we go forward. But as of today, in order to create the fastest momentum, we're going to go down this path, right? You can either try to blaze your own trail, or you can go down the highway that the government has already paved. It's up to you which way you want to create.
I see. If you are clear on your sales process, you know what the next steps are, you can gauge yourself where you at. That translates clarity into client's mind as well. This company really know what they're doing, and they know what the next steps are. So you can drive that clarity and get to the decision much faster, I take it, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Right. Like, I mean, what it ends up doing is instead of everybody arbitrarily saying, like, well, I mean, we could all be given the exact same amount of information from a client. Right. But if without understanding what makes sense for us to go and what makes sense for us to stop, some people are going to choose to go, some people are going to choose to stop, some people are going to choose to wait. And we end up having different momentum as we go forward. Instead, what this ends up doing is saying, because we're clear that these are the clients we want to work with, this is the moments that we move a sales cycle. If a sales cycle stays in this stage for more than this amount of time, we're actually just going to close it out, right? It's either book a meeting or don't book a meeting, but we're not going to continue. Like, there should be zero reason why you have an open sales cycle for like 180 days. Like, and I'm serious, even for big sales cycles, because even when I was selling large complex transactions, when we were in active sales cycle, there was always another meeting, right? And I think the longest time we would always book the meeting was maybe during like the Christmas holidays, where there would be a next meeting booked like 6 weeks out, right? But there was always a next meeting already booked. If you end up having a sales cycle that's sitting at 180 days and you had a couple of meetings with the client ghosted you, but you're like, well, they said to follow back in the spring. You're in a brand new sales cycle, right? You need to approach it as such. Don't keep this open sales cycle like moving forward. Know where everybody is, know where the next steps are, know how long it will take you through that process, and just and be clear with it, right? It might seem really harsh, but this is your business that you're talking about. This is about your revenue that you're talking about. Do you want to leave it for chance and circumstance? Or do you want to know when you're bringing in money and when you're going to be delivering to your clients?
Does the time in between those two meetings, the longer the time is, that the delay in the time, does that change the sales process, Kim? One is a longer time. And how about the new people join in a sales process from client side? Every time they bring a new person, do you go back to the point zero again, from start all over again?
You might not have to go back to point zero, but do know that anytime you bring in a new person into the sales cycle, that you may have to go back into a stage. And you may have to go back into lead qualification or value creation, right? Because we need to make sure that everybody is on the same path. If you're bringing in new salespeople into the process, they need to follow the process the exact same way. And this is why it's really clear to have this articulated, to have it set out step by step so that everyone knows where they are. The moment somebody brand new comes in, it's your job to just kind of reiterate all the conversations that you've had in the past and make sure that the person is on the same path, right? Ask them a few questions so that you're all moving forward. Don't just say, hey, here's the conversation that we had, do you have any questions right now? And then we continue to plow forward. Because they're not going to have any questions. They feel like they were left out of the loop. Whereas you're like, here's some of the conversations that we had, but listen, where do you see us going? What do you see us as the goal, right? There's a reason why that person was brought into the sales cycle. And it wasn't so that they could be a fly on the wall to decisions that were already happening. They were brought in because their opinion and the value they were going to contribute to the buying was ultimately going to help the company. So appreciate that person for what they have to bring and make sure you're asking them the right questions.
Yeah, that could sometimes backfire, right? You're working on a deal and all of a sudden a new person comes in and they don't see the same way you're looking at or the business leader's looking at. And now you're going in two different directions, right? You lose the control on the sales if you do sometimes that.
Yeah.
Okay, very interesting. So any other sales process, definitely critical. I have a habit of I don't know if it's a good habit or bad habit. I have, based on where I'm in a sales process, you can construct your questions accordingly, based on what you want to get out of it. And I sometimes visualize those questions before I want to get into the meeting. I know exactly where I want to take a meeting and what information I want to get out of it. I don't know if it's a good habit or not, but if you know your sales process, definitely give you opportunity to construct your questions accordingly. What's going to be next step in your sales process?
Yeah, I mean, knowing where this is Stephen Covey, right? Start with the end in mind, right? Where do you want to get to, and knowing what that step is, and then asking yourself, okay, well, what comes before that? What comes before that? What comes before that? And what do we need to know in order to move that forward? Like, how do we know we've accomplished this, right? Yet again, going back to the email example, right? Like, how do you know that you've accomplished a good email? Well, is it because someone read it, right? Great. So put red receipts on there and then give yourself a pat on the back every time somebody's opened an email and read it.
Yeah.
Or, is it that somebody's actually responded? Because what that allows us to do is, by getting clear on what we want as a result in each step in the sales process, we can now go in with a microscope and say, okay, what happened or what didn't happen? Right? Where did we lose the client? We've sent off these 10 emails. Not a single one has resulted into a meeting, or at least a response in this case, right? It's not that they're going to go ahead and just book the meeting. That might be the case, but they haven't even responded. So what can we do differently? What didn't we do? Did we even ask a question? Did we ask them to respond to us? Did we ask them to say, I've received this, right? We want to get some type of action out of a client in order to know that we are working together with them, as opposed to a one-way conversation and someone is being reacted upon.
I see. Very interesting. So the companies who are building a sales team, Kim, they're trying to grow revenue. They need to grow, individually or as a team. They need to learn. They need to definitely grow a little bit on sales and build a sales process. Where do they start? Is that something your company help out, or where do they start and how do they go about it?
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much. Yes, absolutely. Please contact us. Whether we are the right fit for your organization, or you just want to learn a little bit more about how we developed the process that we teach so many different companies, that is a great place to at least start. Ask a lot of questions, right? There is no harm in having a virtual coffee with different people. And if a salesperson ever tells you, for any organization, that they won't meet with you, then you know that probably wasn't even the right fit for you. Yeah. Myself and my entire team are more than happy to have a conversation, find out what you're currently doing, what is working, what isn't working, where is there opportunities. And if it's just pieces of advice, we're more than grateful to provide that to you. If there's more that actually involves, involving them into a brand new sales process, involving them specifically in virtual selling, we are more than happy to work with you as well.
Mm-hmm. Very interesting. I wanted to use a phone at the time it was available to us, because I learned so much from our discussion. And thank you so much. And it was there's so much to learn from. And I recommend any business leader who are watching, definitely reach out to you, reach out to your team, have a conversation, and you never know. There's so much to learn from. The depth and knowledge of sales. We all need to grow sales. We need to build company. As a business, people change economy. No government is going to change economy, right? So we all got to we all got to build. Since what we've gone through with the COVID.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Absolutely. No, please. And yes, and if anybody watching, listening, please feel free to connect with me directly on LinkedIn. Let me know that you heard from me on this podcast. I'll be happy to reach out to you personally.
Definitely. I'm going to include a link to your LinkedIn and your website as well, just below the video. They can click a link and they say connect with you. But I learned so much from you. And, I recommend everybody just reach out to you, have a discussion with you, and, learn from you.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much for your time, Kim. Hi there. Thank you so much for investing time with us and watching this video. Hope you enjoyed this discussion. For next episode, please don't forget to subscribe to this channel and send your feedback. Until next time, have yourself a great day. We'll talk soon. Bye-bye.